Hello, my name is Joe Vlasic. I'm a manager here at Westcon Comstore, and today we're going to be talking about the Cisco Common Services Platform Collector. The Cisco Common Services Platform Collector is part of the SMARTnet Total Care offering, and I haven't seen a real good video on deploying the collector, so I thought I'd do one. I think this is one of the cooler pieces of technology that Cisco makes available to its customers for free. You can, if you're a SMARTnet customer already, you're entitled to go online. You can download this application, you can set it up, and it'll give you all kinds of interesting insight into your Cisco devices. We're going to be deploying it on a relatively small topology today. You can see it up on the screen. We've set up a small lab environment for this video. We'll be deploying the collector itself on a UCS server. We'll do collection of just one device. I've got a Catalyst 2800 series router that we're going to go do discovery and collection of. And I want to say at the outset, I've done very, very minimal preparation of this network before this video. I really want to do an end-to-end deployment to show all the steps that go into this. It's relatively straightforward. There's not a lot of heavy lifting to stand this device up. So we're going to be starting at the very beginning here, and I'll show you, starting from the provisioning of the server all the way through collection upload, what it takes to get a collector on your network. You see the server requirements up next to the topology. You see it's very minimal requirements. It's not a resource-heavy application. We're going to be deploying this on, as I said, a 210 server, so 3-4 years old. Doesn't matter what you deploy it on. Doesn't need to be a Cisco server. Just to emphasize that you won't need a lot of hardware capabilities to get this onto your network. You can get this on a small sliver of VM somewhere in your server farm. We're going to be starting with the deployment of the server itself. I've already gone in and I've got my UCS up and running. I've addressed that. I've got my ESXi environment stood up. We're going to be working in that today. I went ahead and deleted my old CSP-C image, so you can see we're going to be starting fresh. I'm going to go ahead and create a new VM. If you're working with VMware, this is really easy to do because Cisco makes an OVA file available for the CSP-C. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and tell ESXi to provision it for me. Standard settings are fine. You can see I now have queued up my job. It's going to be provisioning the server for me. See, it's popped up here. We'll go ahead and take a look at it where it's loading. And you can notice while that's loading with the OVA file, the hardware configuration has been automatically set to what we saw as the server requirements because it's a nicely packaged up VM that we've downloaded. We don't have to do any messing around with the configuration of what it takes to run this device. The OVA file contains all that information. This will provision. It might take 1 minute or so. So we'll let it go ahead and chug through that. All right, our image has been uploaded to the server. You can see it is starting up here. We've got the virtual machine provisioned. It is now loading. The Common Services Platform Collector runs on a hardened version of CentOS. So this is a custom build that Cisco put together specifically for the Common Services Platform. Very limited root access and fairly fast loading as well. So you're going to see when the CentOS image comes up, we're going to have a couple of options. We don't need to do a lot of server work, so if you're a Cisco veteran and don't do a lot of server configuration, you're in luck because we won't have a ton of work to do here. Once this gets loaded, we're going to have a couple of things that we'll need to provide it. The main thing is we're going to give it addressing. Hopefully you've got a place on your network where you can host this server and give it an IP address that's going to have connectivity to the entire network environment. We'll be giving our CSP-C just a private IP address. If you have something on your network like a management VLAN, something that you run your network management system on that already has firewall rules and ACL exceptions and access to the entire network, I recommend you give it an address from that management VLAN if possible. That seems to resolve most of the connectivity issues, and then you don't have to go change a bunch of rules around your network. We'll be testing connectivity on the device once it's set up. I've created a private network just for this lab video, so we won't go through any of the provisioning of the network, but the protocols we'll be using for the device is going to be SNMP and SSH to the Cisco devices themselves, and then we're going to use HTTPS out to the Cisco backend. So when you're building your network diagram or your addressing for this device, please plan appropriately and make sure that those protocols are permitted from this device to wherever it is that you have Cisco switches and routers. We're almost provisioned here. This will take just a minute more. I will say while this is coming up, okay, came up here. We're going to go ahead and give it a static IP address. And 268.16. We'll give it a subnet mask. And then we'll give it a default gateway. And you can see it's saying configuration here. It's going to come back and say we're good. It's going to give us that IP address and a protocol to use to go ahead and access the GUI of the device. There it comes. We'll be using the web browser for the remainder of that. But you can see that's actually it for the server side configuration. Especially when using VMware, it is really that easy to go ahead and provision this. The OVA file contains all the hardware configuration information. You can see we loaded it. We got our CentOS VM stood up, and all we had to do was give it an IP address, a net mask, and a default gateway, and then we're done. The VM is up. We're going to switch from our ESXi management platform over to the GUI itself. I'm going to go ahead and set this up so that we log into the GUI, IP address followed by 8001, and you can see our Common Services platform has come up. We have a GUI here now. What's remaining for us is to go ahead and set up our credentials. It's going to ask the first time you log in to set an admin password and username and password. I'm going to go ahead and set that up now. Log in. And then the first time I'm going to do this, it's also going to ask that I set my my forgot password questions. So you can see it's going to prompt me here. I'm just going to go ahead and pick 3 of these at random and put probably the same answer in all of those. In your production network, it probably goes without saying, but don't do that. I'm just going to put Cisco for all of these. I'm going to go ahead and accept the terms and conditions. And now I am in my Common Services Platform collector. This is really awesome. We're going to be working on the 2.7 platform today, which I really, really like. I've been working with TotalCare and the Common Services Platform for about 5 years now. I've seen a lot of iterations of this, and the 2.7 platform is the first one that has this quick start wizard that we're going to be working through. I think this is really cool. You used to have to go through a lot of different screens. Certainly, if you ever set up like a network management tool or a discovery tool, some kind of network assessment, you know that often you have a lot of different inputs that you've got to pull together. With the CSP-C, they built this wizard in the latest release. I think it's really cool. We're going to work through it. It doesn't require a lot of thought, I don't think. In fact, we might just do sort of a minimal configuration here. I'm going to go ahead and set my time zone, which is the only required portion of this. Certainly production network, set your DNS server, your time, your NTP, and your host name as well. I'm going to go ahead and skip that stuff. This is going to take a couple of minutes to load through each step in the wizard, but we're gonna make this kind of quick. With with a production network, of course, you would set more of this stuff. You see, it is going to prompt me that I did not provide things like my NTP and DNS addresses. I'm okay with that since it's a lab environment, but of course, we recommend you do that for production. All right, the second step here is registration. It's going to prompt you for a certificate file. The license for the CSP-C is free. If you're a SMARTnet TotalCare customer, when you get to this step, I'm going to show you where to get that certificate file. This is a right-to-use license, so you don't need any additional entitlement to get this. Any level of SMARTnet will get you access to this device. Where we're going to go find this certificate file is the SMARTnet TotalCare portal, or what they call Cisco Services Connection. This is actually where your data is going to show up once your upload is done. And you can see the address is simple to remember. It is services.cisco.com. Within this, I've deployed a couple of collectors, so your portal is going to look a little different from mine. Within this, the side pane will not be populated. So the first time you do this, you're actually going to go to services.cisco.com. You'll enter your CCO ID and an active SMARTnet contract. That will validate you. You'll get an email that is a click to accept that says you've signed up for the TotalCare part of the service. And then it'll let you into this portal, and you won't see quite as many options as I have here. What you're going to see is an administration pane that's got a few, just a few options here. What you're going to want to go to is this All Collectors under Administration. You're going to want to go to this Actions button, generate a new CSP-C entitlement, and then this is where we're going to create our certificate file. Once you do the initial upload, so once we've gone through the deployment, we've collected our device, we've sent that information to Cisco, the rest of those options in the pane will populate once there's an actual inventory in there. So if you get to this, your screen looks a little different than mine. Don't freak out, that's normal. that will all appear once you've got all your information up into the portal. So to generate a new entitlement, we're going to give our device a name. This is just locally significant, so it's like a host name. I'm just going to call mine a lab collector, and then the inventory name. Now, the inventory name is globally significant. So don't just name this whatever. What I suggest you do is create something meaningful. I'm just going to call this lab inventory. But I want to say a couple of words about this before we hit submit. The inventory name is what the portal will actually use to correlate your data. So what that means is if I were to deploy multiple collectors, which some customers do, in some cases, you might have something like a regulated environment. Maybe you use part of your network for credit card processing that's got to be PCI compliant, and then you've got maybe your corporate network. In many cases, I find that IT organizations want to deploy different devices for those two different environments. So they might deploy a collector in the regulated environment, and they might deploy a collector in the unregulated environment. If you want those two collectors, for which that you will, of course, generate two different entitlement certificates, if you want them to send their inventories to this portal and them to show up as one inventory, give them the same inventory name. If you want them to show up as different inventories, give them different inventory names. And that will ensure that the way you're seeing your data matches your needs. I've seen environments deploy 2-3 collectors, and they want it all aggregated into one inventory, possibly for when they do their SMARTnet Total Care renewal. I've also seen them deploy multiple collectors, and they want different inventories. Maybe there are different purchasing organizations that don't want to see everything mushed together. So CSP-C name, locally significant, name it whatever you want. Inventory name, globally significant. If you're going to be deploying multiple collectors, write that down and make sure that you use either the same one or a different one depending on what the outcome you want to see is. So I went ahead and hit submit here. You can see it is thinking. It prompts me right away that the entitlement is available. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. It's going to come up as a zip file that you'll see. Don't unzip it. You'll see here the warning in red. Don't unzip it. It is supposed to look like that in a zip file. You can see I've downloaded mine here, and that is what we're going to be using when we set up our CSP-C. So I went ahead and selected that. I'm going to click next. It's going to upload that to my server. You can see it's thinking here, so take a minute or so. And then once that's done, we'll actually start to get into the setup of the device. While that's thinking, a couple of things that you should have handy before we get into the setup. You're going to want to have addressing for the devices on your network. There's a couple of different ways that the collector can go and discover devices in the network. You can use, if you know all your addresses, which is what we're going to be doing today, you can just type those in directly or paste them in from a CSV file. If you know some of your networks, we can also use, like if you know your IP ranges, you can use those and just have it scan a subnet. We can use, if you've got like a network architecture diagram, you can just have it scan all the subnets that you use. You can also use a discovery protocol. So Cisco recommends CDP. They generally do, being their protocol, suggest that is the best one. Not every device supports CDP. There are some devices like Cisco firewalls that don't support CDP. CDP is also sometimes not supported on networks for security or other reasons. So you can see you could also use a routing protocol. You could use ARP. There's a lot of options available. And then with any active discovery protocol, you can set your hop count, and then you give it a seed device address, and the collector will go out and talk to the device, and then that device's neighbors and so on. Today, we're just going to be using, because we're only going to discover one device, we're going to use the actual device IP address, known device IP address. We'll type it in directly. If you've got a network management system that goes out and monitors your network, you could take a seed file out of that. If you take an export of the devices that are in active monitoring, that's usually a pretty good start. I recommend, and probably more importantly, Cisco recommends you actually use at least two methods of discovery. So if you've got a seed file, that's awesome. If you've got a seed file and then you can combine it with an active discovery protocol, that's even better. Or if you can combine it with like an IP address range search. Because what's going to happen is we're going to set up the discovery to run every time that we run a collection. And as part of that, we're going to be, of course, scanning the devices of the addresses that we've specified. But if you also have, a range scan or an active discovery protocol, then you're going to make sure, if your network changes in between discoveries, that you're going to capture any devices that have been added or removed. So we'll just be using fixed address discovery today, but an active discovery method is recommended as well. Okay, so we've got our devices in there. We're now going to put in credentials for those devices. We'll be using, we're going to use two different types of credentials today. We're going to use SNMP, which I've set up on the devices. We're also going to be using SSH. SSH is optional for this. I highly, highly recommend that you enter it if you can, though. It does require level 15 SSH credentials, but there are a lot of features that get unlocked by having SSH, including the ability to see things like show runs and show configs in the portal. I understand there's also some future functionality that's yet to be released that if you have the SSH credentials in there, you'll have access to as well. Let's start with the SNMP credentials, though. I'm just going to put this in as SNMP v2. I have set up on my device the read and write commands, or read and write credentials, rather. It's important that they match when you do this. And you can see I've added them in here. We'll be using V2C on the 2821 router. I've put those in. If you've got multiple credentials, just enter multiple ones, put them in sequence, and when the collector goes and talks to a device, it will actually it'll try them in sequence. So if you've got 10 different credentials in here, when the collector goes and finds a Cisco device, it'll try the first credential. If that doesn't work, it'll move on to the second ones, and it'll try them in sequence all the way through. One thing to note on that, I don't think this is covered in most places. The collector will store what credential is used for it. The reason why I bring that up is, if we put in an SSH credential, and I run a collection on my network, and the collector, tries that credential, it logs into the device, it's successful, and then I make an update to that device. So maybe I update my my user information. I change my passwords. For whatever reason, you will have to go back and update it in the device because the collector will store the last good credential for that Cisco device. And once it has a stored credential for that, it won't go through and try them in sequence anymore. So if it tries it and it doesn't log in, it's unsuccessful getting into the device. It'll sort of pass that device up and then move on to the next device. So note that if you do make changes to your device credentials from time to time, you will have to update your collector. Okay, so we put our credentials in. We're going to move to the collection next. You can start the collection now. You can schedule a periodic collection. The recommended solution is to do a scheduled collection on a weekly basis. We're just going to go ahead and run the collection now just to test connectivity and make sure that this is talking to the device we want it to. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. You can see it's taken us into the dashboard. It's going to prompt me a couple little things here. It's going to ask you to set your email up. It's going to ask you to set up automatic software updates. But you can see here the collection has been running. We actually did discover the device. So this is the IP address we put in. You can see here the inventory. It's telling me in the log message that the inventory ran successfully. It's pretty quick, although we're on a very small network. And you can see here I've got the host name of that device. I've got the model number, and the collector has successfully logged into it. We can verify that by jumping over to our device, and you can see that does match with the device's IP address that's been set up. You can see so the collector is talking to it, has been successful in its collection, and we have verified connectivity to the environment. So that is awesome. We could schedule a collection during the initial wizard setup. I want to do it manually though, just so folks can see how you can set up the scheduled collection and upload, and especially that's useful if you want to be changing the frequency or any of the settings down the line. You can see here I went into settings, I went into manage data collection profiles, and then you see I have a default profile that's already been set up. It is not scheduled. You see that red X there. You won't need to change a lot of settings in here. Generally the default settings are pretty good. I usually leave it on all managed devices unless for some reason you don't want to do an upload of certain devices. You can also do very granular control of what you're uploading to Cisco. We're going to leave that as it is for this video, but you can see over here in the profile details there is a couple of things to check. You can see one of the things you want to look at is run discovery before collection. That basically just tells the device that when there is a scheduled collection, you're going to run those discovery protocols or those IP address scans or go check the known devices again. That's best practice, just to see if there's any changes in the network, so that you, when you run your collection, you're getting the most up-to-date inventory as possible. I'm going to leave data validation on. I'm going to go ahead and collect a periodic collection. I'll go ahead and configure this. Repeat schedule, no end date. Best practice is usually weekly. I do see some who run this more frequently, some who run it less frequently. Weekly is generally what I recommend. I'm going to set this up to go Sunday night, probably, let's say 10 o'clock. Generally, there aren't a ton of people on the network at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, but you may want to set it according to the policies of your company. I will say I've never seen a performance issue as a result of the collector. In my experience, I've done a lot of these deployments. You probably want to set it up off hours anyway, just sort of to be safe. But I do get a lot of questions about, if I run this, do I need to have any special consideration performance-wise? It shouldn't greatly impact the performance of your network, but maybe do it on a weekend evening just to be safe. Repeat every 1 week. Okay. So now I've scheduled this, so it's going to go out Sunday night, 10 o'clock. It will do a collection. It'll do discovery before that collection. And then the last portion of it is the upload. And you can see it's already checked. You don't want to, you don't need to do any configuration here. It's going to export once the collection's done to a file. And then as long as this box here, remote server upload, is checked, it's automatically going to send this out to the Cisco backend. So you don't need to do any configuration. You just need to make sure that you have whatever permissions you need through firewalls and ACLs to get HTTPS out to the Cisco backend, and then you should be all set. So I'm going to click OK here. You can see it's successfully updated the collection profile. My scheduled checkbox is going to, or scheduled icon is going to move from a red X to a blue checkbox here, and that is really it. You can see we went through and did the initial server configuration. We got our OVA file down. We loaded it into our ESXi environment. That was a fairly easy part of the provision. We gave it some addressing, hopefully significant addressing that puts it in a place like a management VLAN on your network that it can see all your Cisco devices. And then we went into the GUI. We're going to use Chrome for that in this case, which is what's recommended. We went through the wizard, the workflow, where we put in some basic configuration of the collector itself, like NTP server and DNS, give it a time zone. We got a certificate from the Smart Services connection, services.cisco.com, and then we loaded in our device information. In this case, we put in a fixed IP address. You can do that. You can do a discovery protocol. You can do an IP address scan. We put in credentials for both SNMP and SSH. And then we ran our collection and upload, and it successfully talked to our device. We do see in the managed devices that we do have our 2821 router that it successfully connected to. And then once that discovery and collection runs, it'll upload to the Cisco backend, and that'll populate in the Smart Services Connection portal, or the SMARTnet Total Care portal, it's sometimes called. One last note on here, one of the most common questions I get is how long after I do this process, after the collection upload, should I expect to see the data in Smart Services Connection? I will tell you that I think the Cisco documentation says something like 24 hours. I will say, just from experience, maybe give it a little longer than that. I've seen it take, for some reason, the initial upload takes a little longer. I've seen it take up to 72 hours. If you run the collection and the upload and this doesn't populate within 2-3 days, you might even want to give it like a couple more. You might want to give it a full week. Sometimes, especially in heavy traffic times, you can see upload times get a little longer than normal. But for some reason, that only seems to apply to the initial upload, and then once that's done, you should see every subsequent upload usually within 24 hours. So the initial population, the initial inventory that goes in there can take a little bit longer. If you get to 48 hours, 72 hours, and it's not in there, don't freak out. That's normal. And then the subsequent upload should take much less time. Everything I covered today is in the Cisco Common Services Platform Quick Start Guide. I'm using the August 2017 edition for 2.7. This has the requirements in there. It has all the steps that you'll need to go ahead and do the discovery, the addressing. It'll walk you through the GUI. It's a very good resource and is available on cisco.com as well. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave a comment. Otherwise, I hope this was useful, and good luck with your Cisco Common Services Platform Collector.